I thought this housewarming meant I could finally breathe in a space that was mine. No more renting or asking permission. But as I raised my glass, my three sisters walked in with suitcases instead of gifts. My mother smiled like she had won a chess game and announced she decided to let my sisters live here. Staring at them, I realized the coldest truth. They did not come to celebrate. They came to move in. My name is Brooklyn Hernandez, and I am 34 years old. For the first time in my life, standing on the porch of number 42 Oak Ridge Drive, I felt like I actually existed. I was not a tenant. I was not a guest. I was not the disappointing daughter crashing on a sofa. I was the owner of a 4-bedroom colonial in the quiet, leafy sanctuary of Briarstone, Virginia. The ink on the closing documents was barely dry, less than 72 hours old. The smell of the house was a mixture of fresh paint, sawdust, and the smoky aroma of slow-cooked ribs from the catering station I had set up in the backyard. I had spent nearly $600,000 of my own hard-earned money to buy this silence. I worked 80-hour weeks as a logistics consultant, optimizing supply chains for companies that did not know how to move product, just so I could move myself away from the chaotic noise of my family. This house was supposed to be my fortress. The wide plank oak floors were mine. The quartz countertops in the kitchen, cool and white as a glacier, were mine. The master suite with the soaking tub that I had fantasized about during 10-hour flights to Tokyo was mine. I had invited friends and colleagues, people who knew the version of Brooklyn who commanded boardrooms, not the version who shrank into the wallpaper whenever her mother entered the room. But, of course, I had invited my family. It was the tax I paid for being a Hernandez. You could not cut them off without setting fire to the entire social fabric of our extended relatives. So I managed them, or at least, I thought I did. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. The mood was perfect. My friend Sarah was pouring a second glass of Chardonnay near the fire pit, and the ambient jazz playlist was just loud enough to fill the gaps in conversation, but soft enough to let the laughter breathe. Then I saw my mother. Diane Hernandez was standing near the patio doors. She was wearing a floral dress that was slightly too loud for the occasion. Holding a glass of champagne as if it were a scepter, she was smiling. That should have been my first warning. Diane did not smile at my achievements. When I got my scholarship, she asked why it wasn't a full ride. When I got promoted, she asked if it meant I would never find a husband. When I told her I was buying a house, she asked if I was sure I could afford the heating bill. But today, she looked like the cat that had not just eaten the canary, but had also inherited the canary's estate. She tapped a spoon against her glass. The sharp, high-pitched ding cut through the murmuring crowd. The music seemed to lower automatically. Attention, everyone. She projected her voice, the sweetness in her tone thick enough to choke on. Can I just have a moment? I stiffened. I was holding a paper plate with a half-eaten rib, and I felt the sudden urge to drop it and run. My stomach tightened, a reflex honed over 3 decades of public embarrassments. My daughter, Brooklyn, Diane continued, gesturing to me with a grand sweep of her arm. Look at this place. Is it not magnificent? She has done so well for herself. So well. A ripple of polite applause went through the guests. I forced a smile, nodding stiffly. But we all know Brooklyn, Diane went on, her voice dropping an octave, becoming confidential, intimate. She is a workaholic, always on a plane, always in a meeting. She is hardly ever in one place for more than 48 hours. My smile faltered. I had not traveled for work in 6 months. I had specifically requested a transfer to the regional office so I could settle down here. Diane knew this, and honestly, Diane chuckled. A sound that grated against my nerves. What does a single woman need with 4 bedrooms and 3.5 baths? It is just so much empty space. It is lonely. And we Hernandez women, we do not do lonely. We do family. The air in the backyard changed. It went from a celebration to something else, something staged. That is why I'm so proud to announce the real surprise today. Diane beamed, looking past me, toward the driveway. Brooklyn has agreed that family comes first. She knows her sisters have been struggling to find their footing in this economy. So, she has graciously decided that this house is going to be the family anchor. My blood ran cold. I had decided no such thing. I opened my mouth to speak, to interrupt, to ask what on earth she was talking about. But the sound of an engine revving loudly in the driveway drowned me out. It was not just one engine, it was a convoy. I turned around, looking through the sheer curtains of the sliding glass doors, past the living room, and out the front window. A large black SUV pulled onto the pavers, followed closely by a rental moving truck. The doors of the SUV flew open. It was like watching a rehearsed military operation. My 3 younger sisters stepped out, and they were not dressed for a cocktail party. They were dressed for labor. Brianna was first. She was 32, married, with a toddler on her hip, and a look of perpetual dissatisfaction etched into her face. She scanned the facade of my house, not with admiration, but with the critical eye of a health inspector. Next was Tessa, 26, wearing oversized sunglasses and chewing gum, looking like she was already bored with the property she had not yet stepped inside. And finally, Jade, the baby of the family at 23, stepping out with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes glued to her phone screen. They walked up the driveway with a terrifying sense of ownership. They did not ring the bell. They did not knock. The front door was unlocked for the party, and they simply pushed it open. I dropped my plate. It hit the pavers with a wet thud, barbecue sauce splattering onto my shoes. But I did not care. I rushed through the kitchen, my heels clicking frantically on the hardwood, bursting into the foyer just as they crossed the threshold. Diane was right behind me, her perfume wafting over my shoulder, suffocating and floral. Surprise! Diane clapped her hands together. I stood frozen in my own hallway. The space I had spent weeks curating, choosing the right console table, the right mirror to catch the light, was suddenly crowded. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and confusion. "Why is there a moving truck in my driveway?" Brianna shifted the toddler to her other hip and looked at me as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Do not be dramatic. Brooke, Mom said we could start moving the big stuff in today while you had the extra manpower from the party." "Moving what stuff in?" I demanded. Tessa walked past me, trailing a hand along the wall. I noticed she had a set of keys in her hand. Not my keys, copies. My stomach dropped. How did they have keys? Then I remembered the spare set I had given Mom for emergencies only 2 days ago. "I like the high ceilings," Tessa said, ignoring my question, "but the light fixture in the dining room has to go. It is too mid-century. We need something more glam if I'm going to host." "You are not hosting anything," I snapped, stepping in front of her. "This is my house." Diane placed a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm, painful. "Brooklyn, honey, lower your voice. You have guests. Do not embarrass us." "Embarrass you?" I hissed, shrugging her hand off. "You just announced to my entire social circle that I am running a charity shelter." "It is not charity," Jade piped up from the back, not looking up from her phone. "It is asset utilization. You are never here. I work remote. I need a dedicated office space with good natural light. The front room is perfect. I already claimed it." "Claimed it?" I repeated the words, feeling like I was speaking a foreign language. "You cannot claim a room in a house you do not own." Brianna rolled her eyes. "Mom said you were going to be difficult. Look, Brooke, my apartment lease is up in 14 days. The baby needs a backyard. You have a backyard. It is simple math. We take the master because we have the most people. You can take the guest room. It is cozy. It fits you." The audacity was so physical it felt like a slap. Brianna wanted the master suite, the one with the soaking tub, the one I had designed for myself as a retreat from the world. I looked out the open front door. 2 men I did not recognize were lifting the back gate of the moving truck. They began sliding a dolly down the ramp. Stacked on the dolly were heavy cardboard boxes, and that was when the true horror set in. It was not just the intrusion, it was the preparation. I walked past my sisters, out onto the porch, and looked at the boxes coming up the walkway. They were not hastily packed bags. They were professional moving boxes, sealed with brown tape, and on the side of each box, written in thick black permanent marker, were destination labels. One box said, Kitchen, Brianna. Another said, Office, Jade. And then, the largest box, the one currently being tilted onto the dolly, read, Master Bedroom, Brianna Tom. They had labeled the rooms, my rooms. I turned back to look at the foyer. My sisters were already dispersing. Tessa was heading toward the patio doors to inspect the bar potential. Jade was walking toward the study, measuring the doorframe with her eyes to see if her desk would fit. Brianna was heading for the stairs, toward my bedroom. And Diane stood in the center of it all, acting like the conductor of a symphony. She caught my eye. There was no apology in her gaze. There was no guilt. There was only the steely resolve of a woman who had spent 30 years moving chess pieces to ensure she never had to be the one to sacrifice anything. You have plenty of money. Brooklyn, Diane said softly, stepping close to me so the guests in the backyard would not hear the venom. You have the job. You have the status. Your sisters have nothing. This is the least you can do. It is my house, I whispered, my voice breaking. It is family property now. She corrected me. We decided. I looked around the room. My friends were starting to drift in from the backyard. Sensing the commotion, Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, holding her wine glass, her mouth slightly open. She looked from the moving men to me, confusion written all over her face. I saw the way Brianna walked up the stairs, her hand on the banister, my banister. She walked with the confidence of someone who knew she would never be evicted. She knew the social contract of our family. The oldest daughter gives, the younger daughters take, the mother facilitates the transaction and calls it love. In that moment, the party died. The music from the backyard seemed miles away. The smell of the barbecue was replaced by the dusty scent of cardboard and the metallic tang of adrenaline in my mouth. I looked at the security camera mounted in the corner of the foyer. The little green light was blinking, recording. Then I looked at Diane. She was already turning away from me, greeting one of my colleagues who had wandered inside to use the restroom. She was charming him, playing the role of the proud mother. While her other daughters dismantled my life in the background, they had not just come to visit. They had terminated their leases. They had packed their lives. They had hired movers. This plan had been in motion for weeks, maybe months. While I was signing papers, they were packing boxes. While I was picking out paint colors, they were assigning rooms. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, freezing the tears that wanted to fall. If I cried, I lost. If I screamed, I was the hysterical spinster who hated her family. They had trapped me in a corner where the only way out was to be the villain. But as I watched a mover carry a box labeled linens, Tessa passed me, I realized something else. They had made a mistake, a fatal, arrogant mistake. They thought this was a family dispute. They thought this was a kitchen table argument where mom's guilt trips would serve as the Supreme Court. They forgot who they were dealing with. I was not just the sister who sent money home. I was a logistics consultant. My entire career was built on identifying inefficiencies, removing bottlenecks, and enforcing contracts, and they had just walked into a site that was under my sole jurisdiction. I took a deep breath. Inhaling the scent of the invasion, I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my phone. I did not move to stop the man with the dolly. I did not run up the stairs to block Brianna. I just watched. I let them carry the boxes in. I let them contaminate the crime scene with their fingerprints. Because Diane was right about one thing. I was a workaholic, and I was about to go to work. The sound of heavy boots on my hardwood floor was the only thing louder than the ringing in my ears. I stood near the kitchen island, watching Brianna descend the main staircase. She walked with a proprietary air, her hand gliding down the banister I had spent 3 hours polishing yesterday. She did not look like a guest. She looked like a landlady inspecting a tenant's unsatisfactory cleaning job. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, shifting her weight. Her eyes met mine, but there was no warmth in them, only a calculation of square footage, the master suite is the only logical choice," Brianna announced. Her voice was not raised, but it carried that specific pitch of entitlement that sliced through the ambient chatter of the party. It was a statement, not a question. I blinked, my hand tightening around the stem of my wineglass until I feared the crystal might snap. "Excuse me?" Brianna sighed, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a slow child. "The master bedroom, Brooklyn. It has the walk-in closet and the dual vanity. Tom and I have the baby. We have the crib. We have the sheer volume of gear that accompanies a human life. We need the space. You are just one person. You would be rattling around in there like a marble in a tin can." She gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. "Plus, the ensuite has the soaking tub. It is perfect for bathing Leo. You know how fussy he gets in standard tubs. It is really a safety issue if you think about it." I stared at her. She was invoking the safety of my nephew to commandeer the room I had specifically designed as my sanctuary. I had chosen that tub. I had chosen those tiles. "You want to put a toddler in the master suite?" I asked, my voice flat. "With the white carpets?" Brianna waved her hand dismissively. "We will put down rugs. The point is, Brooklyn, the guest room at the end of the hall is perfectly adequate for you. It has a nice view of the garden. It is quiet. You like quiet. And honestly, considering you are never home, it is wasteful for you to occupy the primary real estate of the house." I looked past her. Tom, her husband, was already trudging up the stairs carrying a massive plastic bin labeled winter coats. He did not even look at me. He just kept his head down. A soldier following orders in a war I did not know had been declared. Before I could respond, a shrill laugh erupted from the patio area. I turned to see Tessa sliding the glass door open. She stepped inside, bringing a gust of humid air with her. She was holding her phone up, filming a selfie video, panning the camera around my living room. "Hey guys, check out the new digs," she shouted at her screen. "New location for the summer bash. For sure." She lowered the phone and pointed a manicured finger toward the outdoor kitchen I had installed. "That corner out there? Perfect for a wet bar. I am thinking we get a kegerator. I can move my DJ equipment into the sunroom. If we clear out your reading chair or whatever that is, we can fit a decent sound system." I felt a vein throb in my temple. Tessa was not asking if she could host a party. She was redesigning the floor plan to accommodate her social calendar. "Tessa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "that is my reading nook." "Not anymore," she chirped, grabbing a can of seltzer from the cooler I had set out for guests. "We need flow. Brooklyn, if this is going to be the party house, we need to optimize the layout. You are too stiff with your decor. We need to loosen it up, make it lived in." I looked toward the dining room. Jade was already seated at the head of my mahogany table. She had pushed my centerpiece, a carefully arranged vase of lilies, to the far edge, where it teetered precariously. In its place, she had set up a dual-monitor command center. Her laptop was open. A portable second screen was unfolded, and a tangle of charging cables was already snaking across the wood toward the nearest outlet. "The lighting in here is actually decent for video calls," Jade muttered, half to herself, half to me. She began unpacking a stack of file folders from a tote bag. "I am claiming this as the dedicated workspace. I have stand-ups at 9 in the morning, so I need absolute silence in this sector until noon." She looked up at me, her expression dead serious. "That means no vacuuming and no loud music in the mornings. Brooklyn, I cannot have background noise on client calls. It looks unprofessional." "Unprofessional?" The word nearly choked me. "You are setting up an office on my dining table in the middle of my housewarming party, and you are lecturing me about professionalism?" I took a step back, looking at the three of them. Brianna claiming the bedroom, Tessa claiming the yard, Jade claiming the table. They were like a swarm of locusts that had descended upon a field, dividing up the crops before the farmer had even finished planting them. "Who told you to bring your things?" I asked. The question came out louder than I intended. The conversation in the living room stopped. My colleagues, my friends, the people I respected, they all fell silent, watching the train wreck unfold. Who told you that you could move in? I repeated, my voice shaking with a mixture of humiliation and fury. Diane stepped out from the kitchen. She held a tray of appetizers, acting as if she were the hostess calming a rowdy guest. "Brooklyn, honey," she cooed, walking toward me with that maddeningly serene smile. "Lower your voice. You are making a scene." "I am making a scene?" I gestured wildly at the boxes piled in my hallway. "There is a literal moving crew in my driveway. Mom, who authorized this? Family shares? Brooklyn," she said. It was her mantra, the universal solvent she used to dissolve all boundaries. "We do not stand on ceremony," Diane continued, placing the tray on the coffee table. "Your sisters need stability. You have this enormous house. It is simply the right thing to do. Why are you acting so surprised? You always said you wanted to take care of us." "I never said I wanted to run a boarding house," I snapped. I walked over to the nearest stack of boxes, the ones piled by the coat closet. I needed to see it. I needed to understand the mechanics of this ambush. My eyes scanned the cardboard. These were not old boxes scavenged from a liquor store. These were brand new, uniform packing boxes from a professional logistics company. I leaned in closer. Taped to the side of a box labeled "Kitchen Appliances" was a packing slip. I ripped it off the cardboard. "Hey!" Brianna shouted from the stairs. "Do not touch that." I held the paper up to the light. It was an invoice from Swift Shore Moving Company. I scanned the lines until I found the date of service booking. "October 14th, I read aloud. I looked at my mother. "Today is October 28th. You booked the movers 2 weeks ago." The room went deadly silent. Even Tessa stopped typing on her phone. 2 weeks ago, I was still negotiating the final inspection repairs. I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the betrayal. "I had not even signed the final deed, and you had already booked the trucks." Diane did not flinch. She smoothed the front of her dress. "We had to plan ahead." "Brooklyn, moving requires logistics. You of all people should appreciate that. We knew you would agree because you are a good daughter. We just handled the details so you would not be burdened." "Burdened?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound that lacked any humor. "You planned a hostile takeover of my home before I even owned it." Diane's face hardened. The sweet mask slipped just a fraction. "Stop being selfish. Brooklyn, it is unbecoming. Look at you. You are a single woman in her 30s. You have no husband. You have no children. You work all the time. What do you need with 4 bedrooms? A gym? A guest room for friends who visit once a year?" She gestured to Brianna, who was clutching her toddler like a shield. "Your sister is raising a family. Tessa is trying to find herself. Jade is building a career. They need a home. You just need a place to sleep." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. "You just need a place to sleep." She was stripping away my humanity, reducing me to a biological function, a worker drone who required a charging station and nothing more. In her eyes, my success did not entitle me to comfort or luxury. It only made me a resource to be harvested by those who had chosen different paths. I looked around the room. My guests were pretending not to listen, staring into their drinks or examining the molding, but I knew they heard every word. I could feel their pity. It burned my skin. Diane was masterfully painting the narrative. If I kicked them out now, in front of everyone, I was the heartless, rich sister throwing a young mother and a baby onto the street. I was the cold, unfeeling career woman who cared more about her white carpets than her own flesh and blood. I saw Sarah standing near the fireplace. She caught my eye. She did not look away. She walked over to me, ostensibly to put her empty glass on a coaster, and leaned in close. "Brooke," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "they are not just visiting. They are unpacking. I just saw your sister put her clothes in the hall closet. They are moving in. For real." Sarah's words acted like a splash of ice water. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to have an outside observer confirm the insanity. This was not a drift. This was an occupation. I looked up at the ceiling corner, where the small black dome of my security camera sat. I had installed the system 3 days ago. mostly to monitor packages and deter burglars. I never thought I would be using it to build a case against my own blood. I looked back at Diane. She was watching me, her chin tilted up in challenge. She believed she had won. She believed that social pressure and my lifelong conditioning to be the good girl would force me to swallow this. She thought I would smile, apologize to the guests, and spend the next 10 years living as a guest in my own mortgage if I let those boxes stay tonight. They would never leave. If I let Brianna sleep in that master bed one single night, possession would turn into entitlement, and entitlement would turn into squatters' rights. Diane picked up a skewer of grilled chicken and took a delicate bite. "Come on, Brooklyn, be reasonable. Let the boys finish unloading. We can discuss the chore wheel later." Chore wheel. The phrase triggered a memory of my childhood. Me doing the dishes while Tessa watched TV. Me folding laundry while Brianna went to the mall. I took a deep breath. The scent of the expensive perfume Diane wore mixed with the smell of the dust from the moving boxes. I set my wine glass down on the island. The sound of the glass hitting the quartz was sharp and final. I checked the time on my phone. 6:45 in the evening. I looked at the invoice in my hand one last time. It was not just a piece of paper. It was a declaration of war. And unlike my sisters, I did not start wars based on emotion. I finished them based on facts. I lifted my head and looked Diane dead in the eye. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. I was done being the daughter. I was the homeowner, and the lease had just been denied. "This is my property," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air of the living room like a scalpel. It was not a question. It was not a plea. It was a statement of fact backed by a deed recorded at the county clerk's office. "I do not permit anyone to stay here. You need to leave. Now." The room, which had been buzzing with the low murmur of 40 guests, went completely silent. The jazz playlist I had carefully curated seemed to mock the tension with its upbeat tempo. Diane let out a short, incredulous laugh. She waved her hand at me as if swatting away a gnat. "Oh, stop it. Brooklyn, do not be ridiculous. You are embarrassing yourself. I am not the one invading someone else's home," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "Mothers cannot invade." Diane countered, her smile tight but still fixed in place. "We are family, and I have decided this is what is best for everyone. You are just overwhelmed right now. You will thank me later when the house is full of life instead of just you and your laptop." She turned her back to me, a deliberate gesture of dismissal, and clapped her hands at my sisters. "Chop chop. Girls, let us get the truck unloaded before it gets too dark. The movers are charging by the hour." The blatant disrespect hit me physically, like a punch to the gut. She was not just ignoring my authority, she was erasing it. She was counting on the fact that I had spent 3 decades seeking her approval. Betting everything that I would not risk losing her love by making a scene, but she had miscalculated the currency I was operating in. I was no longer trading in affection. I was trading in law. I watched as Brianna turned around and continued up the stairs, carrying a stack of folded towels. Tessa reached into a box and pulled out a cocktail shaker, setting it on my kitchen counter with a loud clank. Jade sat down at my dining table and plugged her laptop charger into the floor outlet. The blue spark of the connection signaling that she was settling in for the long haul. They were creating a status quo. Every item they unpacked was an anchor, a claim staked in the soil of my life. If I let them finish unpacking that truck, if I let them sleep here for even one night, the legal battle would shift from trespassing to eviction. Eviction could take months. Trespassing could be solved tonight. I did not scream. I did not throw a vase. I did not give them the emotional explosion they were expecting, the one that would allow them to paint me as the unstable, hysterical daughter. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and opened my encrypted messaging app. I found the contact labeled Evan Cole, Esquire. I typed a single word. Start. I hit send. Then I opened the camera app, switched it to video, and held it up. The red recording dot began to pulse. From this moment forward, I announced, my voice steady and loud enough to reach every corner of the open concept floor plan. I am formally rescinding any invitation to my family members. You have been asked to leave. You have refused. You are now trespassing on private property." Tessa looked up from the wet bar she was organizing. She snorted, a sound of pure derision. "You are recording us? Seriously? Put the phone down. Brooklyn, you look like a psycho." "I am documenting a crime," I said calmly. Diane spun around, her face flushing a deep, angry red. "That is enough. Put that away. You are ruining the party. The party is over." I said, I looked at my guests, my colleagues, my college friends, my neighbors. "I am so sorry. Everyone. But I have to ask you all to leave. Please. Right now." There was a collective shuffle. My friends, bless them, did not ask questions. They set down their drinks, grabbed their purses and jackets, and began to file out the front door, casting sympathetic and horrified glances in my direction. They knew what was happening. They were witnessing a violation. As the last guest stepped out, the house felt suddenly larger and infinitely colder. It was just me and the 4 women who shared my DNA, but none of my values. "You are acting like a child," Brianna shouted from the top of the stairs. She leaned over the banister, glaring down at me. "We are not going anywhere. I have already set up the crib. Then you will have to take it down." I said. Tessa slammed her hand onto the quartz countertop. "Oh my God, you are such a bitch. Brooklyn, you have all this space and you cannot even share a corner? You are going to kick your own nieces and nephews out on the street?" "I am not kicking anyone anywhere." I said, "You have a home. You just terminated the lease because you thought you could steal mine. That is a poor strategic decision." "Tessa, not my emergency." Tessa laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "What are you going to do? Huh? You cannot physically throw us out. There are 3 of us and 1 of you. And Mom is right here. You are not going to do anything." She was right about the physics. I could not physically remove them, but I did not have to. I tapped the screen of my phone again. I brought up the keypad. 1, 1. My thumb hovered over the final digit. Diane saw what I was doing. Her eyes widened. "Brooklyn, do not you dare." I pressed the 9. The phone began to ring. I put it on speaker, holding it out like a shield. Tessa froze. Her smirk wavered. "You would not." The line clicked. Electronic trill. "Emergency services, 911. Where is your emergency?" The operator's voice filled the room. Calm and dispassionate. My sister stopped moving. Jade looked up from her laptop, her face draining of color. Brianna stood frozen on the stairs. "Hello?" I said, my voice clear and distinct. "My name is Brooklyn Hernandez. I am the sole owner of the property at 42 Oak Ridge Drive. I have 4 individuals in my home who are refusing to leave after being explicitly told to vacate. They are currently moving furniture in without my consent. I need police assistance to remove trespassers." There was a beat of silence on the line. Then the operator asked, "Are the individuals known to you?" "Yes," I said, watching my mother's face crumble from arrogance into shock. "They are family members, but they are not residents, and they are not welcome. I feel unsafe due to their aggressive behavior and refusal to respect my property rights." "Understood," the operator said. "Officers are being dispatched. Stay on the line." I lowered the phone but kept the connection open. Tessa stared at me, her mouth hanging open. "You actually called the cops? On your own mother? On your sisters? You left me no choice." I said, "You are sick," Diane hissed, stepping toward me. Her hands were shaking. "You are going to have your mother arrested? Do you have any idea what the neighbors will think? Do you have any idea how this looks? It looks like you broke into my house." I said, "Because that is exactly what you are doing." Diane lunged for the phone. "Give me that. Tell them it is a mistake." I stepped back, keeping the table between us. "Do not touch me. Mom, if you touch me, I will add assault to the charges. The call is being recorded." She stopped. For the first time in 34 years, Diane Hernandez stopped. She looked at me and saw something she did not recognize. She was looking for the little girl who cried when she was yelled at. That girl was not here. That girl had died the moment those moving trucks pulled into the driveway. Outside, in the distance, a faint wail began. It rose and fell, getting louder with every second. Sirens. The sound pierced the walls of the house. It was the sound of reality crashing into their fantasy. Brianna ran down the stairs, panic written all over her face. "Mom! Mom! The police are coming! I have a warrant for unpaid parking tickets in the city. I cannot talk to the cops." "Then you should have stayed at your own apartment," I said coldly. Jade slammed her laptop shut. "This is insane. I am not getting a record because you guys are crazy." She grabbed her bag and headed for the side door that led to the garage. I watched her go. I did not move to stop her. Instead, I opened the Smart Home app on my phone. I swiped to the security tab. I tapped the icon labeled Perimeter Lockdown. A mechanical thunk, thunk, thunk echoed through the house as the heavy deadbolts on the garage door, the patio door, and the back service entrance slammed home. Jade grabbed the handle of the garage door and yanked. It did not budge. She twisted the lock manually, but the electronic override held it fast. "It is locked!" she screamed. "Let me out!" "The front door is open," I said, pointing toward the main entrance where the flashing blue and red lights were now washing over the foyer walls. "You can leave through the front door, where the police can see you." I wanted them to walk out the front. I wanted the cameras to catch their faces. I wanted the neighbors, who were undoubtedly peering through their blinds, to see them leaving in shame. I was controlling the exit route. I was turning my house into a funnel. The sirens cut off abruptly as the cruisers pulled into the driveway, replaced by the heavy thud of car doors closing. Diane looked out the window. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin white line. The smile, that weaponized, condescending smile she had worn since she arrived, was gone. It was dead. She turned to me. Her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it almost took my breath away. "You will pay for this, Brooklyn. You will lose everyone." I looked at the blue lights dancing on my white walls. I looked at the boxes that did not belong to me. I looked at the family that had tried to consume me. "I have already paid." "Mom," I said softly, "I paid $600,000 for this house, and I am not giving you a single square inch of it." Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel walkway. A sharp, authoritative knock hammered on the front door. "Police! Open up!" I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally standing my ground. I walked to the door. Stepping over a box labeled Kitchen, Tessa, I put my hand on the knob. This was not a party anymore. This was a crime scene, and I was the only witness who mattered. The heavy oak door swung open, revealing 2 uniformed police officers standing on my front porch. The flashing red and blue lights from their cruiser washed over the white columns of the entryway, casting a strobe-like, disorienting rhythm over the scene. The sudden shift from the warm, amber glow of my foyer to the harsh, authoritative glare of law enforcement felt like a physical drop in temperature. The officer in front was a tall man with a buzz cut and a name tag that read, Officer Reynolds. Behind him was a female officer, Officer Gable, who had her thumbs hooked into her duty belt, her eyes already scanning the chaotic hallway filled with boxes. "Good evening," Officer Reynolds said, his voice flat and projecting a practiced boredom. "We received a call regarding a domestic disturbance and trespassing." Diane rushed forward before I could speak. She smoothed her hair, putting on the face of the concerned, respectable matriarch, the mask she had worn at church socials and parent-teacher conferences for 30 years. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," she said, her voice trembling with a manufactured frailty. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter is having some sort of episode. We are just trying to help her settle in, and she—" I stepped into the light, cutting off her narrative with the sharp edge of reality. "I am the homeowner." I stated clearly. I pointed to myself. I made the call. These people are not residents. They are not guests. I have asked them to leave multiple times, and they have refused. Officer Reynolds looked from me to Diane, then to the mountain of cardboard boxes stacked behind us. He did not look impressed by Diane's performance. He looked like a man who wanted to clear the call and get back to his patrol. "Who is the legal owner of the property?" he asked. It was the only question that mattered. I said. Diane scoffed. A wet, dismissive sound. "It is family property. I put the down payment." "That is a lie," I interrupted, my voice steady. I pulled up the folder I had prepared on my phone. I stepped forward, handing the device to Officer Reynolds. "Here is the digital copy of the deed recorded 2 days ago," I said, pointing to the screen. "Here is the closing disclosure showing the wire transfer of the full down payment from my personal savings account at Chase Bank. Here is the current property tax assessment in my name, Brooklyn Hernandez. And here is the homeowner's insurance policy, effective as of yesterday." Officer Reynolds took the phone. He scrolled through the documents. The silence that stretched out was agonizing for them. But for me, it was the first moment of peace I had felt all night. It was the silence of facts. Facts do not care about guilt trips. Facts do not care about family values or sharing. Diane tried to peek over his shoulder. "Officer, really, this is unnecessary. We are her mother and sisters. We are moving in to support her. She is overwhelmed by her success. It has blinded her to what is important." Officer Reynolds did not look up. He zoomed in on a signature. He checked the dates. Then he handed the phone back to me. "The documentation seems to be in order," he said. He turned to Diane. "Ma'am, is your name on the deed?" Diane stiffened. "Well, not technically, but emotionally and morally. This family operates as a unit." Officer Reynolds held up a hand. The gesture was small, but it stopped Diane mid-sentence. "Ma'am, the law deals with technicalities," he said. "If your name is not on the deed, and you do not have a lease agreement, you have no legal right to be on this premises if the owner revokes consent." He turned back to me. "Do you grant them permission to stay?" "No," I said. The word hung in the air. Absolute and final. Officer Reynolds nodded. Then he turned to the group. Diane, Brianna, Tessa, and Jade, who had crept back from the garage door. "You need to vacate the premises immediately," he announced. The room exploded into noise. "You cannot be serious," Tessa shrieked. "We just unloaded the truck." "Officer, please." Brianna stepped forward, shifting the baby to her other hip, thrusting the sleeping child into the police officer's line of sight. "My son is sleeping. It is dark outside. You cannot expect a mother to drag a toddler out into the night. We have nowhere to go. Our apartment lease is up." She was using the child as a human shield. It was a tactic I had seen her use a dozen times to get out of speeding tickets or to skip the line at restaurants. "Look at the baby. Have mercy on the mother." Officer Gable spoke up for the first time. Her voice was sharper than her partner's. "Ma'am, that is a civil matter between you and your landlord. Right now, you are trespassing. You can leave voluntarily, or we can assist you. If we assist you, you will be leaving in handcuffs." The threat of handcuffs sucked the oxygen out of the room. Diane's face went white. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. She had expected a mediation. She had expected the police to tell us to work it out, because we were family. She did not understand that in the eyes of the Commonwealth of Virginia, she was just an intruder. "But our stuff!" Jade yelled, gesturing to the command center she had set up on my dining table. "We cannot move all these boxes back out tonight. The truck driver already left." "We cannot wait for you to repack," Officer Reynolds said, hooking his thumbs into his vest. "Grab your essentials, keys, wallets, medications, phones. Anything else stays here until you can arrange a civil standby to retrieve it. But bodies need to be outside, now." This was the logistical nightmare they had not anticipated. By unpacking, they had trapped themselves. They could not take the beds, the clothes, or the furniture they had just hauled in. They had to leave with nothing but the clothes on their backs. I watched them scramble. It was pathetic and satisfying in equal measure. Brianna began to cry. Loud, ugly sobs that woke the baby. The child started screaming. adding a layer of acoustic chaos to the scene. "You are a monster." "Brooklyn!" Brianna shouted over the baby's wails as she frantically shoved diapers into a tote bag. "You are throwing a baby onto the street." "I am not throwing anyone onto the street," I said, my voice cold. "You have a car. You have credit cards. There is a Holiday Inn 3 miles down the road. You created this emergency." "Brianna." "Not me." Diane was not packing. She was staring at me, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I cannot believe you," she whispered. "After everything I did for you, I raised you, I sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in front of the police? You humiliated yourself when you decided my house was your property." I replied. Jade leaned in close to Diane. I heard her whisper, a frantic hiss meant only for our mother's ears. "Mom, let us just go. You said she would not dare make a scene. You said she would just fold like always. This is not working." I heard that. I said. Jade froze. She looked at me, her eyes wide with the realization that she had just confessed to the conspiracy. I looked at Diane. "You gambled, Mom. You bet everything on the idea that I was too weak to stand up for myself. You bet that I would rather be miserable than be the bad guy." I took a step closer to her. The police officer watched us closely, ready to intervene. "I am done being the investment you cash in." I said, "Get out of my house." Officer Reynolds stepped forward, his patience evaporating. "Ladies, let us go. Move it to the driveway." The exodus began. It was a slow, shuffling procession of defeat. Tessa walked past me first. She stopped for a split second, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "You are going to regret this," she spat. "You think this is over? You just started a war. Brooklyn, you are going to die alone in this big empty house. Is that a threat?" Officer Gable asked, stepping up behind her. Tessa flinched. "No, just a fact." She stormed out the door. Jade followed, clutching her laptop bag to her chest like a life preserver. She did not look at me. She just kept her head down, scurrying past the officers like a criminal avoiding the paparazzi. Brianna was next. She carried the screaming baby in one arm and the diaper bag in the other. She stopped in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "I hope you are happy," she sobbed. "I hope your quartz countertops keep you warm at night." "They will," I said, finally. It was Diane. She did not rush. She gathered her purse with a slow, deliberate dignity, trying to salvage whatever scraps of authority she had left. She walked to the door and stopped. She turned to look at me one last time. "This is not a home." "Brooklyn," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It is just a building, and without us, you are nobody." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. I saw the lines around her mouth, the bitterness in her eyes. I saw a woman who had never built anything of her own, only consumed what others had created. "I am the owner," I said, "and that is enough for me." Officer Reynolds ushered her out. "Let us go." "Ma'am, keep moving." I followed them to the threshold. I stood in the doorway, watching as they trudged down the walkway to the SUV. The neighborhood was awake. Curtains were twitching in the windows across the street. Mrs. Higgins next door was standing on her porch in her bathrobe, watching the spectacle with rapt attention. My family, the people who were so obsessed with appearances, were now the stars of the neighborhood scandal. They were being escorted off the property by police, leaving their possessions behind like evicted squatters. They reached the car. Diane got into the driver's seat. The sisters piled in. The car doors slammed shut, one by one. Officer Reynolds walked back up the driveway. "We will stay until they clear the street, ma'am." He said, "Do you want to press charges for the trespassing? Or just have the report on file?" "Just the report for now," I said, my hands trembling slightly now that the immediate confrontation was over. "But I want it noted that they have keys." "Unauthorized copies. We will note it," he said. "I suggest you change the locks tonight if you can, or get a locksmith out here first thing in the morning." I watched the SUV back out of the driveway. It paused for a moment at the end of the street, the brake lights glowing like angry red eyes in the darkness. Then it peeled away, disappearing around the corner. The silence that followed was heavy. The sirens were gone. The screaming baby was gone. The toxic comments were gone. I looked back inside my house. It was a wreck. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Muddy footprints tracked across the hardwood. A half-eaten tray of appetizers sat on the coffee table, but it was empty of them. I looked at the officer. "Thank you." He tipped his cap. "Have a good night, ma'am. Lock up tight." I closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I listened to the satisfying metallic thud of the lock engaging. I leaned my back against the wood, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor of my foyer. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely clasp them together. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me feeling hollowed out and exhausted. But then I looked across the room at the box labeled Master Bedroom, Brianna. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held. I walked over to the security panel on the wall. I armed the system to stay mode. I pulled my phone out again. I opened the group chat, the Hernandez girls chat, that had been buzzing with their plans for weeks without me knowing. I typed one message. "Any attempt to re-enter this property without a police escort will be met with immediate legal action. I am archiving all communications. From today, we speak only through evidence." I hit send, then I blocked them, all of them. I stood in the center of my silent house. It did not feel lonely. For the first time in 34 years, it felt safe. The silence that filled my house after the police cruiser disappeared around the bend was not the peaceful silence of solitude. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops. The air still felt charged with the electricity of the confrontation, vibrating with the echoes of my mother's screaming and the humiliating wails of my sister. I stood in the foyer, my back pressed against the locked door. The house was mine again, legally and physically, but it did not look like mine. It looked like a warehouse. The invaders had retreated, but they had left their supply lines behind. The hallway was an obstacle course of cardboard, a tower of boxes labeled kitchen. Brianna blocked the path to the living room. A plastic tote bin marked winter clothes. Tessa sat squarely on the rug I had bought in Morocco. My dining table, the centerpiece of my open-concept design, was still cluttered with Jade's cables and docking station, looking like an abandoned command post. My first instinct was to purge it all. I wanted to open the garage door and drag every single item out to the curb, to let the dew and the raccoons have their way with Brianna's duvet covers and Tessa's cocktail shakers. I wanted to erase their fingerprints from my sanctuary, but I did not touch a thing. Instead, I dialed Evan Cole. It was nearly 10 at night, but Evan answered on the second ring. He was not just my lawyer. He was the only person who had told me, years ago, that my family dynamic was not normal. "I did it," I said, my voice sounding hollow in the empty house. "I called the police. They are gone." "Good," Evan said. His voice was calm, a steady anchor in the storm. "Now, listen to me carefully. Brooklyn, do not touch their things. I want them out." "Evan," I said, looking at a box that had been carelessly dropped on top of my ficus plant, snapping a branch. "I want to burn them. Do not touch them," he repeated, sharper this time. "Right now. Those boxes are not trash. They are evidence. They are proof of intent to occupy. If you move them to the curb, they can claim you destroyed their property. They can sue you for damages. They can claim those boxes contained antique china or cash." I rubbed my temples. "So I have to live in a storage unit?" "You have to live in a crime scene," Evan corrected. "Treat it like one. Document everything. I want a digital inventory of every single item they brought across your threshold. Photograph the labels. Photograph the placement. We need to prove that this was not a casual visit. This was a coordinated invasion." I hung up and went to work for the next 3 hours. While the rest of Briarstone slept, I became a forensic photographer in my own home. I started at the front door. I took a wide-angle shot of the foyer, showing the sheer volume of the items. Then I moved in for the details. I crouched down next to the stack of boxes Brianna had brought. I zoomed in on the labels. Master bedroom, sheets, master bath, toiletries, Leo's room, toys. My hand shook as I snapped the picture. Leo's room. She had already renamed the guest room. She had not just planned to stay. She had mentally erased my ownership before she even arrived. The label was written in her bubbly, loops and swirls handwriting, the same handwriting she used to sign birthday cards where she asked for money. It was cheerful, domestic, and utterly sociopathic. I moved to the dining room. I photographed Jade's workstation. I took a video of the tangled wires, narrating the time and date. Time is 10:45 p.m. on October 28th. This is the dining area. Unauthorized setup of electronic equipment by Jade Hernandez. I walked to the patio doors. Tessa's contribution was less organized but equally damning. A stack of liquor bottles, a box of shattered glass where she had dropped something in her haste, and a portable speaker system. I felt a cold chill as I realized the depth of the betrayal. They had not just packed overnight bags, they had packed their lives. The logistical coordination required to rent the truck, pack these boxes, and terminate their leases meant they had been planning this for at least 30 days. While I was showing them paint samples last month, they were packing. While I was telling Mom how excited I was to finally have a garden, she was deciding which of my sisters would get the view. I finished the documentation at 1 a.m. My phone gallery was full of hundreds of images. I uploaded them immediately to a secure cloud folder, then to a backup drive, and then I emailed the link to Evan. I did not sleep in my bedroom that night. I slept on the sofa in the living room, clutching my phone like a weapon, listening to the creaking of the house, half expecting the windows to shatter. The physical invasion had failed, but the digital siege began at exactly 7:15 the next morning. I woke up to a phone that was vibrating so constantly it felt like it was having a seizure. I had blocked my mother and sisters the night before, but I had forgotten about the extended network. The Hernandez family was vast, spanning 3 states, and communication traveled through it faster than a virus. I opened the Hernandez family reunion group chat, a chat I usually kept muted for my own sanity. It was exploding. Aunt Rosa. I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Brooklyn, call your mother immediately. She is devastated. Cousin Mike. That was cold. B. Calling the cops? Seriously? Uncle Hector. Family business stays in the family. You do not bring the law into it. You shamed us all. And then, a screenshot forwarded by a cousin who clearly enjoyed the drama. It was a text Diane had sent to the entire family mailing list at 6 a.m. It was a manifesto of martyrdom. I read the text, my stomach churning with acid. My dearest family, please pray for my daughter Brooklyn. She has lost her way. Last night, she had a mental break and turned her back on her own flesh and blood. She threw her baby nephew out into the cold night because she cares more about her expensive floors than her family's safety. We are heartbroken, but we forgive her. Success can be a demon. We only wanted to be close to her, to help her fill that big, empty house with love. But she chose to be alone. Please do not hate her. She is sick. I stared at the screen. It was a masterclass in manipulation. In one paragraph, she had painted me as mentally unstable, materialistic, and cruel, while positioning herself as the forgiving, loving saint. She had weaponized her own humiliation. My finger hovered over the leave group button. I wanted to disconnect. I wanted to throw the phone into the toilet. But Evan's voice echoed in my head. Evidence. I did not leave the group. I did not reply. I took screenshots. I scrolled back and captured every accusation, every flying monkey who had been dispatched to guilt-trip me. Then, a notification popped up from my email. It was from Diane. Since I had blocked her number, she had moved to the one channel I could not easily close off because of work. The subject line was, Olive Branch. I opened it. Brooklyn. I know you are angry. I know you are stressed. The police was a step too far. And you know it, but I am willing to overlook your tantrum because I am your mother. The girls are staying at a motel. It is filthy. Leo is crying. Here is the solution. You do not have to apologize to me yet. I know you are stubborn. Just leave the back door unlocked today. Brianna needs to get the rest of the baby's things, and honestly, it is ridiculous for them to pay for a motel when you have 3 empty rooms. Give Brianna the spare key. Let her stay in the master suite just for a few weeks until she finds a place. We can discuss the rest later. Do this to keep the peace. Do not make me tell your grandmother what you did. Love, Mom. I laughed, a dry, rasping sound in the empty room. To keep the peace. That was the phrase she had used my entire life. Give your sister your doll to keep the peace. Do not tell Dad I spent the grocery money. Just keep the peace. Let Tessa borrow your car. Keep the peace. Peace, in the Hernandez family, always meant Brooklyn's surrender. It meant my silence. It meant my boundaries were the collateral damage required to maintain Diane's fantasy of a happy family. I did not reply. I forwarded the email to Evan with a note. Harassment. Then my phone pinged with an Instagram notification. It was from a friend of mine, alerting me to a story posted by Tessa. I clicked the link. Tessa had posted a black screen with small, white text in the center. No names were mentioned, but the target was unmistakable. You think you know people? You think blood means loyalty. But some people get a little money and forget where they came from. Imagine calling the police on a baby. Karma has a waiting list, but it never misses. She had added a feeling heartbroken sticker. I checked the views. 200 people had seen it. Mutual friends, people from my high school, people from my old neighborhood. They were building a narrative. They were fighting a public relations war while I was sitting in a fortress of cardboard boxes. They knew they could not win the legal argument. The deed was ironclad, so they were trying to win the court of public opinion. They wanted to shame me into opening the door. I put the phone down and looked at the camera I had installed in the corner of the living room. It was a standard consumer model, decent but basic. It was not enough. If they were willing to lie to the family, if they were willing to twist the truth this violently, they would be willing to come back. They would try to retrieve their things, or worse, they would try to stage an accident to sue me. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. Stepping over a box labeled POTS and pans, Jade, I opened my laptop and went to a security supply website. I did not look at the price tags. I looked at the specs. I ordered 3 external motion-activated floodlights with 4K resolution. I ordered a video doorbell with facial recognition. I ordered window sensors for every single ground floor opening. Then I bought a cloud storage subscription. The enterprise tier. 5 terabytes of storage. Infinite retention. I went into the settings of my current system and enabled audio recording. Virginia was a one-party consent state for recording conversations effectively, but inside my own home, where there was no expectation of privacy for intruders. I was going to capture every whisper. I was not just securing a property, I was building a digital trap. As I clicked confirm purchase, a realization washed over me. It was a cold, clarifying thought that settled in my chest like a stone. This was not about housing. Brianna could have found an apartment. Tessa could have stayed with her friends. Jade made enough money to rent a workspace. They did not need my house. They needed my house. They needed to take it from me because my ownership of it disrupted the hierarchy. In Diane's world, I was the worker bee. I was the one who served. I was the useful child, not the successful one. By buying this house, by creating a life that was objectively better than theirs, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had outgrown them. I had proven that I did not need them. Taking the house was their way of putting me back in my place. If they lived here, it was not my achievement anymore. It was the family compound. If they occupied my space, I became a guest in my own life again. They wanted control. I looked at the text from Diane again. Do this to keep the peace. I closed the laptop. There would be no peace. If I gave them an inch, they would take the foundation. If I let Brianna stay for a few weeks, she would be there for 20 years. If I apologized, I would be apologizing for the rest of my life. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. It was a gray, overcast morning. The neighborhood was quiet. Let them post their stories. Let them send their flying monkeys. Let them spin their lies in the group chats. I had the deed. I had the timestamps. I had the photos. They wanted a war? They thought I was the same soft-hearted Brooklyn who used to do their homework and cover their debts? They were about to discover that the only thing stronger than a mother's guilt trip was a notarized affidavit. I picked up my phone and sent one more message to Evan. They are escalating. I am securing the perimeter. Prepare the cease and desist letters. And Evan? Do not just send them. Serve them. I turned back to the silent, cluttered room. I am ready. I whispered to the boxes, and for the first time, the house seemed to answer back, settling around me with a protective, stony silence. 3 days after the police escorted my family off my property, the doorbell rang again. It was not a friend, and it was not a delivery driver with my Amazon packages. It was a process server. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker who handed me a thick, heavy envelope, mumbled a standard legal greeting, and walked away before I could even check the return address. I stood in my foyer, the same spot where I had watched my mother weep fake tears, and looked at the bold black lettering on the corner of the envelope. Graves and Barlow Legal Group. The name sounded like a firm that specialized in aggressive divorces and ambulance chasing. The kind of lawyers who advertised on billboards next to the highway. I tore it open. Inside was a stack of documents thick enough to choke a shredder. The cover page was a summons and complaint. Plaintiff: Diane Hernandez, Brianna Hernandez, Tessa Hernandez, Jade Hernandez. Defendant: Brooklyn Hernandez. I walked into the kitchen and laid the paperwork on the island. Next to my cup of coffee, my hands were steady. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was reading a script for a movie I was not starring in. I began to read. The legal jargon was dense, but the narrative they were spinning was clear. Paragraph 4 claimed that the property at 42 Oak Ridge Drive was purchased pursuant to a verbal family partnership agreement. It alleged that I, Brooklyn Hernandez, was merely the nominee title holder, and that the down payment, though drawn from my account, was actually commingled family assets entrusted to me for the purpose of securing housing for the entire clan. I laughed out loud. It was a dry, humorless sound. Commingled assets? My sisters had negative net worths. My mother lived on a fixed income and credit card debt. Every cent of that $600,000 was mine, earned through sleepless nights and endless travel, but they were not just asking for money. They were asking for equitable interest. They wanted a judge to rule that the house belonged to all of us, and therefore, I could not exclude them. They were demanding immediate access to the property and a partition of use, essentially, a legal order forcing me to let them move back in. I reached for my phone to call Evan. I wanted to tell him that they were delusional. I wanted to joke about how desperate they had become, but before I could dial, my phone lit up. It was Evan calling me. His timing was impeccable, as always. I swiped right. Evan, you are not going to believe this, I said, leaning against the counter. I just got served. Graves and Barlow? Who are these clowns? They are claiming I am just holding the title for the family. Brooklyn, listen to me. Evan cut me off. His voice was not the calm, reassuring baritone I was used to. It was tight, urgent. I stopped. What is it? Are you sitting down? He asked. I am standing. Just tell me. I have my paralegal monitoring the county clerk's filings daily, just in case they tried to put a lien on the house. Evan said quickly, About 20 minutes ago, a new document was recorded against your property, APN. A lien? I asked, confusion knitting my brow. They cannot file a lien without a judgment. It is not a lien. Brooklyn, Evan said, it is a quitclaim deed. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. I gripped the edge of the granite countertop. A quitclaim deed? I repeated. That transfers ownership. Exactly, Evan said. According to this document, which is stamped and recorded as of 9 o'clock this morning, you have transferred 50% of your interest in the property to something called the Hernandez Family Trust, with Diane Hernandez as the trustee. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees actually buckled, and I had to slide onto one of the bar stools. I never signed that. I whispered, Evan, I never signed anything. I have not signed a single piece of paper since the closing. I know you did not, Evan said firmly, but the county clerk thinks you did. The document has a signature that looks like yours. It has a notary stamp. It has been processed. As of right now, legally speaking, your mother owns half your house. The silence that followed was deafening. This was not a dispute anymore. This was not a family drama. This was a felony. They forged my signature. I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. They actually forged my signature. It looks that way, Evan said. I am looking at the digital copy right now. It is sloppy. Brooklyn, the signature is a little too shaky. The notary stamp belongs to a guy named Marcus Chen. Wait, no, sorry. A guy named Marcus something. I cannot read the last name clearly. It is smudged, but his commission number is listed. We are running it now. But here's the thing. The date of the signature is listed as October 28th, the day of the party. I closed my eyes, playing back the events of that night, the chaos, the boxes, the police. I had been watching them like a hawk. When would they have had time to get me to sign a deed? They did not. I said, they faked it. But how did they get it to the county so fast? Evan was typing furiously in the background. Look, we have to move fast. I am filing an emergency motion to stay the transaction and a lis pendens, that is a notice of pending legal action, to freeze the title. If they try to take out a loan against their half of the house, we need to block it immediately. A loan. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That was the end game. They did not just want to live here. They wanted to strip the equity. They knew the house was worth nearly $1 million. Half of that was $500,000. They wanted to cash out. Brooklyn? Evan asked. Are you there? I am here, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. Do whatever you have to do. Freeze it. Sue them. I do not care. I need you to look at something for me. Evan said. The original deed would have needed to be mailed or dropped off. If they forged it, they needed to get the physical paper to the clerk or a courier. Check your security cameras. October 29th, the night after the party. Did anyone come to the house? I will check right now. I said. I hung up and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped my password twice. I pulled up the cloud footage. I scrolled back to the night of October 29th. The house had been dark. I had been inside, sleeping on the couch. Exhausted from the inventory, I scrubbed through the timeline. 10 o'clock at night, nothing. 11 o'clock, nothing. 11:45. A car turned onto the street. It was a sedan, dark color, maybe a Honda or a Toyota. It drove slowly past my house, then stopped 3 driveways down. It sat there for 2 minutes. Lights off. Then, the car rolled forward, creeping along the curb without headlights. It stopped directly in front of my mailbox. The passenger door opened. The street lights were dim, but my new 4K cameras were not. The resolution was crisp. A figure stepped out. It was a woman wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up. But I knew the walk. I knew the specific, slightly pigeon-toed gait of my sister Tessa. She walked quickly to my mailbox. She did not take anything out. She put something in. She raised the red flag on the mailbox, the signal for the postal carrier to pick up outgoing mail. Then she jumped back into the car, and it sped off. I stared at the screen. They had mailed it from my own house. They had forged the deed, put it in an envelope, and placed it in my own outgoing mailbox so that the postmark would originate from my address. It was a detail meant to add authenticity to the fraud. But wait, I rewound the video. Tessa put the envelope in. She raised the flag. But the deed was recorded this morning. Mail takes 2 or 3 days. I fast-forwarded. 3 in the morning. Another vehicle appeared. This one was not a sedan. It was a beat-up station wagon. It pulled up right next to the mailbox. A hand reached out from the driver's window. It did not put mail in. It took the envelope out. The flag went down. The car drove away. I paused the video and zoomed in on the station wagon. The license plate was blurry, covered in mud, but the bumper sticker on the back was distinct. It was a faded baby on board sticker. peeling at the corners. I knew that car. It belonged to a friend of Tessa's, a guy named Rick, who used to do odd jobs for my mother. It was a relay. Tessa dropped the forged document in my box to make it look like I had placed it there, perhaps snapping a photo of it in the box as proof if needed. Then Rick came by later to retrieve it, so they could hand-deliver it to the county clerk or a courier service to ensure it was recorded immediately. Bypassing the postal delay, it was elaborate, it was calculated. And it was incredibly stupid because they did not know I had upgraded the cameras. I called Evan back. I have them. I said, I have them on video. Tessa dropping the envelope in the mailbox, and an accomplice picking it up 3 hours later. Perfect, Evan said, his voice grim. Send me that clip. Now. I am sending it. I said, Evan, how bad is this? It is bad for them. Evan said, this is forgery, fraud, and conspiracy. If we can prove the signature is fake, and we will, because I will hire a forensic handwriting analyst by noon. They are looking at prison time. Brooklyn, not a slap on the wrist, prison. I sat back in my chair. Prison, my mother, my sisters, a week ago. I was worried about hurting their feelings by not letting them move in. Now, I was holding evidence that could send them to a federal penitentiary. The shift was so massive I felt dizzy. I looked at the lawsuit again. The Graves and Barlow papers. This lawsuit is a smokescreen, isn't it? I asked. Exactly. Evan confirmed. They filed the lawsuit to create a cloud on the title, to make it look like there was a legitimate dispute. That way, when the quitclaim deed appeared, it would look like a resolution to the dispute. Oh, look, Brooklyn settled and gave us half the house. It covers the tracks of the forgery. They really thought this through, I murmured. They thought through the mechanics, Evan said. But they forgot that real estate law is precise, and they forgot that you have me. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the mailbox. It looked so innocent standing there at the end of the driveway, a metal box on a wooden post. I realized then that I had been wrong about their motivation. I thought they were just lazy. I thought they just wanted a free ride. But lazy people do not forge legal documents. Lazy people do not hire process servers. Lazy people do not set up dead drops in the middle of the night. This was malice. They did not just want to share my success. They resented it. They hated that I had escaped the crab bucket, and they were willing to break the law to drag me back down. They wanted to liquidate my sanctuary and turn it into cash they could squander on leased cars and bad investments. I felt a hardening in my chest, the last lingering shreds of guilt, the little voice that sounded like my grandmother saying family is everything, finally evaporated. I picked up the Graves and Barlow envelope. I walked to the kitchen drawer and took out a lighter. For a second, I thought about burning it, but no. That was what the old Brooklyn would do. The emotional Brooklyn, the new Brooklyn, the homeowner, the plaintiff. Walked to her office. I placed the documents in a crisp manila folder. I labeled it Case File. Fraud. Then I went to my safe. I opened it and took out my passport and my original birth certificate. I wanted to make sure they were safe. As I closed the heavy steel door of the safe, I caught my reflection in the keypad screen. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, but I also looked dangerous. They had tried to steal my house with a pen and a lie. I was going to take their freedom with a video clip and the truth. I sat down at my desk and opened a new email to Evan. Subject: Additional instructions. Evan, file the motion, freeze the title, call the forensic analyst. And one more thing, I want to file a countersuit. Not just for the legal fees. I want to sue for slander of title. I want damages for every single second they have made me feel unsafe in my own home. If they want to claim equitable interest, let us show the court exactly what their interest is worth. Nothing. I hit send. Then I went to the kitchen and made a fresh pot of coffee. I had a feeling it was going to be a long day. The war had just moved from the front lawn to the judge's chambers, and I had just been handed the ammunition I needed to win. I sat in Evan's office in downtown Richmond, the leather chair cool against my back. The air conditioning was humming. a low, steady drone that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the last 48 hours. Evan was pacing behind his desk, looking at the lawsuit filed by Graves and Barlow. He looked tired. "They are going to argue that this was a constructive trust," Evan said, rubbing his chin. He stopped and looked at me. "It is a common strategy in family disputes. They will claim that even though your name is on the deed, the family pooled resources or provided labor, or that there was an explicit verbal understanding that you were holding the property for the benefit of the group. It is," he said. She said, "Without written proof to the contrary, a judge might hesitate to throw them out completely, especially with the mother claiming she put up the down payment." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. I placed it on the mahogany desk. It made a solid, metallic click. "They are not going to argue anything." "Evan," I said. Evan looked at the drive. "What is that?" I leaned forward. "You asked me if I had proof that I paid for the house. I gave you the bank statements. But you are worried about the verbal agreement part. You are worried that my mother will get on the stand and cry and say, 'We had a secret pact.'" I took a breath. I knew this was coming. "Evan, not the forgery." That shocked me. "But the claim? The entitlement? I saw that coming 6 months ago." I picked up the flash drive and held it between my thumb and forefinger. When the framing went up, my mother started saying things like, "our living room," and "our patio." It made me nervous. So, back in July, I started using a voice memo app on my phone. I recorded every major conversation we had about the house. Evan's eyebrows shot up. "You recorded them?" I nodded. "There is a file on there dated August 12th. I said, "We were at Olive Garden. It was my birthday dinner. Mom had a few glasses of wine. I brought up the mortgage payments. I specifically asked her, 'Mom, are you okay that I'm spending all my savings on this? It is a huge risk for me alone.'" I paused, savoring the memory of the trap I had unknowingly set. "Play the file, Evan." Evan plugged the drive into his laptop. He clicked through the folders. He found the date. He hit play. The sound of clinking silverware and background chatter filled the office. Then, my voice, clear and anxious. "It is just a lot of money. Mom, the whole down payment. I am wiping out my 401k. Then, Diane's voice. It was slurred slightly, happy and expansive. "Oh, honey, do not worry. You are doing the right thing. It is your money. You earned it. I am so proud that you could buy a house like this all by yourself. Your sisters could never do it. You are the rock. Brooklyn, you are the independent one." Evan hit pause. He looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. "She explicitly admits you bought it all by yourself," he said, "and she distinguishes you from the sisters. There is more," I said. I pointed to the laptop screen. "Folder number 2, the night of the housewarming. You have the footage of Tessa mailing the forged deed, but you need to hear the conversation in the SUV before they walked in." Evan clicked the file. The video was from the high-definition driveway camera I had installed days before the party. The audio pickup was sensitive, designed to catch license plates and voices at the curb. The image on the screen showed the black SUV idling in my driveway. The windows were up, but the audio filter cut through the glass and the engine noise. The voices were muffled but intelligible. "Mom, are you sure she's going to let us stay?" That was Jade. Her voice sounded whiny. "She has to." Diane's voice cut in, sharp and commanding. "We have the truck. We have the baby. She is not going to make a scene in front of her fancy friends. Just start moving the boxes in. Once the crib is up, she is trapped. She is too weak to kick us out." "What if she says no?" Tessa asked. "Then we tell everyone she is abandoning her family," Diane replied. "She cannot handle the guilt. Just stick to the script. The house is ours. We just have to occupy it." Evan sat back in his chair. He let out a long, low whistle. "That is not a misunderstanding," he said softly. "That is conspiracy. That is premeditation. They explicitly discuss manipulating you and relying on your social anxiety to bypass your consent." He looked at me with a new level of respect. "You are dangerous. Brooklyn, I am prepared. I corrected him. Evan turned back to his computer. He began typing furiously. This changes everything. The verbal agreement defense is dead. The family trust defense is dead. We have them on tape admitting it is a hostile takeover. Now, let us look at that deed again. He pulled up the digital scan of the forged quitclaim deed on his second monitor. He zoomed in on the notary stamp. Marcus Vane. Evan read, Commission number 744921. He opened the state database of licensed notaries. He typed in the number. The screen refreshed. Status: expired. Evan laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. The commission expired 4 years ago, he said. And look at the name. The database lists a Marcus Vane, but he is deceased. He died in 2021. They bought a fake stamp. I said, or they found an old one in a pawn shop. Or they ordered it online from a shady supplier and did not check the dates. Evan added, either way, this document is a nullity. It is void on its face. And the fact that they filed it? That is uttering a forged instrument. That is a Class 4 felony. The phone on Evan's desk buzzed. He looked at the caller ID. Speak of the devil, he said. It is Graves and Barlow. He put the call on speaker. This is Evan Cole, he said, his voice dropping into his professional litigator tone. Mr. Cole, this is Richard Graves. A slick, oily voice came through the speaker. I am calling regarding the Hernandez matter. We received your notice of the emergency motion. Look, we think things have gotten a little heated. My clients, Ms. Hernandez and her daughters, are very emotional right now. They feel they have been treated unfairly. I rolled my eyes. Evan held up a hand to silence me. Your clients committed fraud. Richard, Evan said flatly. Now, that is a strong word. Graves chuckled nervously. There is a dispute over the validity of a document. Sure, but families are messy. Look, my clients are willing to be reasonable. They are willing to drop the lawsuit for the partition of the property. I leaned forward. Listening. Here is the offer. Graves continued. They will acknowledge Brooklyn's title. They will walk away from the ownership claim. In exchange, Brooklyn allows Brianna and her child to reside in the master suite for 6 months, rent-free, to get back on their feet. And she pays Diane $10,000 for consulting fees regarding the house design. We call it a settlement. We seal the records, and everyone goes home happy. My blood boiled. They had forged my signature, tried to steal half my equity, and now they wanted free rent and cash? I shook my head violently at Evan. No, Evan did not need my signal. Richard, Evan said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze nitrogen. You are not listening. We have audio recordings of your clients conspiring to occupy the home against my client's will. We have recordings of Diane Hernandez admitting the home is solely Brooklyn's property, and we have proof that the notary on your quitclaim deed has been dead for 3 years. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Dead? Graves asked, his voice losing its oily confidence. Dead. Evan confirmed. We are not settling. We are not negotiating a lease for Brianna. Here is our counteroffer. Evan looked at me. I nodded. Number 1. Evan said, your clients will withdraw their lawsuit with prejudice immediately. Number 2. They will sign a sworn affidavit admitting the quitclaim deed was a forgery and consenting to its removal from the county records. Number 3. They will agree to a permanent restraining order barring them from coming within 500 feet of Brooklyn Hernandez or her property. That is extreme, Graves sputtered. They are family. You cannot expect a mother to sign away her right to see her daughter. I have one more condition, I whispered to Evan. Evan nodded. And number 4, Evan said, no money, 0, not a dime for moving costs, not a dime for consulting. They will never agree to that, Graves said, his voice rising. They need a win here. Evan, if they walk away with nothing, they lose face. They need something to show the family. Even just a month for Brianna. It is a pride thing. Then they can keep their pride in a jail cell. Evan said, we will see you in court. Graves snapped, and the line went dead. Evan hung up. He looked at me. They refused? I asked. Though I knew the answer. They refused. Evan said, "They are banking on the idea that you will not actually go through with a criminal complaint. They think you are bluffing. They think that deep down, you are still the little girl who wants mommy's approval. They do not believe you will nuke the bridge." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city of Richmond. I thought about the boxes in my hallway. I thought about the baby on board sticker on the getaway car. I thought about the label Leo's room. They wanted a precedent. If I let Brianna stay for one night, I established that my boundaries were negotiable. If I paid them $1, I established that they had a right to my earnings. They wanted to harvest me, and they were angry that the crop had developed thorns. "File the countersuit," I said. Turning back to Evan, Evan pulled up a fresh document template. "What are the causes of action?" he asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Everything," I said. "I want to sue for trespass to real property." I listed, counting on my fingers, civil conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, slander of title for the forged deed, and I want to sue for quiet title to resolve the ownership once and for all. "And legal fees?" Evan asked. "And legal fees," I said. "And punitive damages. I want the jury to see exactly what they did." Evan typed rapidly. The clicking of the keys sounded like gunfire. "This is going to get ugly." "Brooklyn," Evan warned without stopping his typing. "Once we file this, there is no going back. This becomes public record. The whole town will know your mother is a fraud." "Good," I said. I walked over to the desk and looked at the screen. The words, "Defendant." Diane Hernandez looked beautiful in black and white. They spent my whole life telling me I was selfish for wanting things for myself. I said quietly, "They told me I owed them. Well, now the bill is due, and I am the one collecting." Evan hit the final key. "Draft is ready," he said. "I can file it electronically in 10 minutes. Do it," I said. I picked up my purse. I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy envelope from Graves and Barlow was still in my bag. But it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a mistake. Their mistake. "Where are you going?" Evan asked. "I am going to go buy some new locks," I said. "And then I am going to wait for the process server to find my mother at her motel." I walked out of the office. The sun was shining on the pavement outside. It was a bright, cold autumn day. I checked my phone. Another text from a cousin I barely knew, calling me a traitor. I deleted it without reading the rest. The war was on, and for the first time, I had the bigger guns. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a scent that was supposed to inspire reverence but today just smelled like anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Evan, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. I had spent my life dreading the idea of public conflict with my family, avoiding it at all costs, paying any emotional ransom they demanded just to keep the noise down. But the silence in courtroom 4B was different. It was the silence of judgment. The bailiff called the case, Hernandez versus Hernandez. I looked across the aisle. My family had arrived, and they were in full costume. Diane, who usually refused to leave the house without her gold jewelry and bright floral prints, was wearing a shapeless charcoal gray cardigan that looked like it had been bought at a thrift store specifically for this morning. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun, emphasizing the lines on her face. She looked frail. She looked like a martyr. Brianna sat next to her, clutching a tissue. Her eyes red-rimmed. She wore a simple white blouse and no makeup. Tessa and Jade sat behind them, heads bowed, looking for all the world like innocent children caught in a divorce. They were playing the role of the abandoned family to perfection. If I did not know them, if I did not know that Tessa had threatened me with a war and Jade had tried to hack my Wi-Fi, I might have felt sorry for them. Mr. Graves, their lawyer, stood up. He was a man who clearly charged by the syllable. He adjusted his tie and looked at the judge, the Honorable Sarah Vance, with a mournful expression. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with theatrical sorrow. "This is not a complex legal matter. It is a human tragedy. We have here a mother, Diane, who gave everything to raise 4 daughters. She sacrificed her youth, her finances, and her comfort, and now, in her twilight years, one of those daughters has found success. He turned to point a finger at me, an accusing, shaking finger. But instead of lifting her family up, Brooklyn Hernandez has chosen to lock them out. She has chosen to call the police on her own flesh and blood. She has chosen to hoard a 4-bedroom mansion while her sister and infant nephew have nowhere to go. We are here today to ask the court to recognize the equitable interest this family holds in that property. We ask the court to enforce the verbal agreement they made to share this home as a family unit. Diane dabbed at her eyes. Brianna let out a soft, audible sniffle. It was a masterful performance. Judge Vance looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Cole, you're opening?" Evan stood up. He did not look mournful. He did not look emotional. He looked like an accountant who had found a discrepancy in the ledger. "Your Honor," Evan said, his voice crisp and dry, "we are not here to discuss moral philosophy or the nature of gratitude. We are here to discuss property law." He walked to the projector screen set up in the center of the room. The defense claims there is an equitable interest. Interest implies investment. Investment requires capital. Evan clicked a button. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. It was a breakdown of the purchase of 42 Oak Ridge Drive. "Here's the wire transfer for the down payment of $120,000, Evan said, using a laser pointer to circle the line item. Source: Brooklyn Hernandez. Personal savings. Here is the closing cost payment of $18,000. Source: Brooklyn Hernandez. Here are the mortgage payments for September and October. Source: Brooklyn Hernandez. He flipped the slide. Here are the tax returns for Diane Hernandez, Brianna Hernandez, and Tessa Hernandez for the last 3 years. Combined, their contribution to the purchase price of this home was $0, not 1 cent. Graves stood up. "Objection. Your Honor, financial contribution is not the only measure of a partnership. There was emotional reliance. There was a verbal contract. Overruled," Judge Vance said, writing something down on her notepad. "Proceed. Mr. Cole," Evan nodded. "Thank you. Now, let us address the events of October 28th. The defense characterizes their arrival as a family visit that went wrong. They claim they were invited guests who were rudely ejected. Evan clicked the remote again. The screen filled with the high-resolution photos I had taken that night. The first image was the stack of boxes in my foyer. "This is a photograph taken at 10 p.m. inside the plaintiff's home," Evan said. "Note the labels." He zoomed in. Master bedroom, Brianna Tom. Office, Jade. Bar, Tessa. "If this was a visit," Evan asked, looking directly at the defense table, "why did they pack winter coats? Why did they bring a crib? Why did they label the rooms with their own names?" Diane shifted in her seat. She did not look at the screen. She stared resolutely at the table. Evan called Brianna to the stand. Brianna walked up, looking terrified. She took the oath. "Ms. Hernandez," Evan said, leaning against the podium, "you stated in your affidavit that you went to your sister's house to celebrate her achievement. Is that correct?" "Yes," Brianna whispered. "We just wanted to be there for her." Evan pointed to the screen. "Can you explain why you brought a box labeled winter coats to a celebration in October?" Brianna blinked. "Well, it gets cold. We thought we might stay over." "Stay over?" Evan repeated. "Just for the night?" "Yes," Brianna said. "Just a sleepover, like we used to do when we were kids." Evan clicked the remote. A new image appeared. It was the invoice from Swift and Sure Moving Company. "This is an invoice booked in your name, Ms. Hernandez," Evan said. "It lists the service as full relocation. It lists the destination as my client's address, and it was booked 14 days prior to the party." Brianna's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "If you were just visiting for a sleepover," Evan pressed, his voice hard, "why did you hire professional movers to transport your entire apartment's contents? And why did you terminate the lease on your current apartment effective November 1st? Brianna looked at Graves for help. Graves was studying his papers, refusing to make eye contact. We assumed, Brianna stammered. Mom said Brooklyn wouldn't mind. Mom said it was okay. So you admit you intended to move in permanently? Evan asked. Brianna looked at Diane. Diane's face was stone. Yes, Brianna whispered. We had nowhere else to go. Thank you, Evan said. No further questions. Brianna stepped down. The damage was done. The visit narrative was dead. Graves tried to recover. He stood up again. Your Honor, even if they intended to move in, it was because they believed they had a right to. They relied on the mother's assurance. Diane Hernandez had a verbal agreement with the plaintiff. A mother's word is a contract in this family. Judge Vance looked at Evan. Mr. Cole, any response to the verbal agreement claim? Evan smiled. It was a small, predatory smile. Actually, Your Honor, we do. He pulled out the flash drive. We would like to enter into Evidence Exhibit C, an audio recording dated August 12th of this year. Graves stood up fast. Objection. Hearsay. We have not authenticated this recording. It is a party admission, Your Honor, Evan said calmly, and the plaintiff can authenticate it as she recorded it. I will allow it, Judge Vance said. Play the clip. The courtroom fell silent. Evan pressed play. The sound of the Olive Garden filled the room, the clinking of forks, the hum of conversation, and then, my voice. It is just a lot of money. Mom, the whole down payment. I am wiping out my 401k. And then, Diane's voice, loud, clear, undeniable. Oh, honey, do not worry. You are doing the right thing. It is your money. You earned it. I am so proud that you could buy a house like this all by yourself. The recording played on. Your sisters could never do it. You are the rock. Brooklyn. Evan stopped the tape. The silence in the room was absolute. It felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out by the air conditioning vents. Diane Hernandez was staring at the table, her face a mask of frozen horror. Her hands were gripping the edge of the wood so hard her knuckles were white. She knew. She knew that in 10 seconds of audio, her entire legal strategy, the family partnership, the commingled assets, the verbal trust, had been incinerated. She had admitted it was my money. She had admitted it was my house. She had admitted I was doing it alone. Graves looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He slowly sat down, closing his folder. He knew it was over. Evan turned to the judge. The defense relies on a verbal agreement, but the defendant herself is on record confirming that the plaintiff acted alone, with her own funds, and that the purchase was solely her achievement. There was no partnership. There was no trust. There was just a daughter buying a house and a family plotting to take it. Judge Vance nodded slowly. She looked at Diane. Ms. Hernandez, do you dispute that is your voice on the recording? Diane did not answer. She shook her head slightly. Speak up, please, the judge ordered. No, Diane whispered. That is my voice. Judge Vance leaned back in her chair. She looked from Diane to the sisters, then to Graves. Her expression shifted from neutral to stern. Mr. Graves, your argument for an equitable interest seems to have evaporated, but we still have a much more serious matter to discuss. She picked up a file from her bench. It was the motion Evan had filed regarding the quitclaim deed. This court has been presented with evidence concerning a quitclaim deed recorded on October 29th, purporting to transfer 50% of the property to a family trust. The judge looked directly at Diane. Ms. Hernandez, this document bears a notary stamp from a Mr. Marcus Vane. Are you aware that Mr. Vane passed away in 2021? Diane flinched as if she had been slapped. Tessa, sitting in the back row, made a small, strangled noise. I did not know that. Diane stammered. Someone handled the paperwork for me. A friend. A friend? Judge Vance asked, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. A friend who has access to a dead man's notary seal? A friend who forged the signature of the plaintiff? I did not forge anything, Diane cried out. Losing her composure, Brooklyn must have signed it. She forgets things. She is stressed. Ms. Hernandez. Judge Vance slammed her gavel down. Do not lie to this court. We have a forensic report stating the signature is a simulation. We have video evidence of your daughter Tessa placing the document in the plaintiff's mailbox to create a false paper trail. Tessa gasped. She looked around the room, panic rising in her eyes. She realized suddenly that the anonymous drop-off had been watched. Judge Vance continued, This is not a civil dispute anymore. This is fraud. This is a deliberate attempt to deceive the county clerk and this court. She looked at Graves. Counselor, I am strongly suggesting you advise your clients of their Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, because I am about to refer this file to the district attorney's office. Graves stood up, looking pale. Your Honor, may we have a recess? No. Judge Vance said, We are finishing this today. She turned to me. Ms. Hernandez, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff on the matter of the title. The quitclaim deed is hereby declared void ab initio. The court affirms your sole fee simple ownership of the property. She turned back to my family. As for the defendants, your counterclaim is dismissed with prejudice. And regarding the plaintiff's request for a restraining order, given the fraudulent activity and the coordinated attempt to invade the home, I am granting a permanent protective order. 5 years, 500 feet, no contact. Diane let out a sob. It was not a fake sob this time. It was the sound of a woman realizing that her power, the power she had wielded over me for 34 years through guilt and obligation, had just been shattered by a gavel. But what about the house? Diane wailed. Where are we supposed to live? That, Judge Vance said coldly, is not the plaintiff's problem. And considering you attempted to steal her home, I suggest you find alternative arrangements before the district attorney contacts you regarding the forgery charges. The judge stood up. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I sat there for a moment, unable to move. It was done. I looked over at the defense table. My sisters were arguing. Jade was hissing something at Tessa. Tessa was crying. Diane was sitting with her head in her hands, completely defeated. Evan touched my arm. Brooklyn, you okay? I took a deep breath. The air in the courtroom no longer smelled like anxiety. It smelled like freedom. I am fine. Evan, I said, I am better than fine. I stood up, gathered my purse, and walked toward the exit. I had to pass their table to leave. Diane looked up as I approached. Her eyes were red, swollen, and filled with a mixture of fear and lingering rage. You destroyed this family, she whispered. I stopped. I looked down at her. No, Mom, I said calmly. I just stopped letting you destroy me. I walked out the double doors and didn't look back. The courtroom air was heavy, stagnant with the scent of recycled air and nervous sweat, while the judge had already viewed the initial evidence regarding the ownership of the house. We were now deep in the weeds of the evidentiary hearing regarding my countersuit for fraud and civil conspiracy. This was the moment where the why and the how had to be answered. My family sat on the other side of the aisle, the united front they had presented an hour ago. The weeping mother, the huddled sisters, was beginning to fracture. They looked less like a grieving family and more like suspects in separate interrogation rooms who had not managed to get their stories straight. Evan stood in the center of the room. He looked entirely at ease, one hand resting on the podium, the other holding a single sheet of paper. He turned his attention to Jade. Jade was supposed to be the smart one. She was the one who worked in tech, the one who bragged about her logic. But right now, she looked like a deer caught in the high beams of a semi-truck. Ms. Hernandez, Evan began, his voice conversational but laced with a dangerous precision. You stated earlier that you moved your home office into my client's dining room because you were relying on a specific promise that you could live there. Is that correct? Jade straightened her blazer. Yes, Brooklyn promised us. She said the house was for everyone. Evan nodded slowly. And when exactly did this conversation take place? When did Brooklyn explicitly tell you, Jade, You can move your office into my house? Jade hesitated. Her eyes darted to the left, a telltale sign she was constructing a memory rather than retrieving one. It was Labor Day weekend. She said firmly, "We were at a barbecue. She said she had too much space and wanted me to use it." Evan did not look up from his paper. "That is interesting," he said, "because 20 minutes ago, your sister Brianna testified that the promise was made the week before the closing, which was in mid-October, and your mother stated in her deposition that the agreement was made when the foundation was poured back in June." Evan looked up. "So, which is it? Ms. Hernandez? Did she promise you in June, September, or October? Or did she never promise you at all?" Jade's face flushed a splotchy red. She stammered, "Well, it was a recurring conversation. She said it multiple times." Evan turned to the judge. "Your Honor, note the inconsistency. 3 witnesses, 3 different timelines for the single most important contract of their lives." He turned back to the defense table. He did not let up. He walked toward Tessa. Tessa was not like Jade. She was volatile. She was the one who had threatened me in the driveway. Evan knew that. He was not looking for a logical slip-up from her. He was looking for an explosion. "Ms. Tessa Hernandez," Evan said, "let us talk about the night of the party. You arrived with a moving truck. You brought alcohol. You began setting up a bar. I was just trying to be a good hostess." Tessa snapped. Evan paused. "You walked into a house you did not own, uninvited, and started moving furniture. Why didn't you ask for a key beforehand? If you were so sure you were welcome, why didn't you call Brooklyn and say, 'Hey, can I pick up the key on Tuesday?'" Tessa rolled her eyes. "She is busy. She never answers her phone." Evan pressed harder. "Or was it because you knew that if you asked her privately, she would say no?" "No!" Tessa shouted. "She wouldn't say no." "Then why the ambush?" Evan asked, his voice rising just a fraction. Enough to provoke. Why bring the truck during a party with 40 guests? Why not come the next morning? "Because the guests were there," Tessa blurted out. The room went silent. Tessa froze, realizing she had just opened a door she could not close. Evan leaned in. "Because the guests were there? Explain that to the court. Ms. Hernandez, why did the presence of guests make it the right time to move in?" Tessa looked at Diane. Diane was staring straight ahead. Her jaw clenched. Tessa looked back at Evan, her face twisting in frustration. "Because she is fake," Tessa yelled, gesturing at me. "Brooklyn is so obsessed with looking perfect, she would never cause a scene in front of her fancy friends. We knew if we just walked in while people were watching, she would be too embarrassed to stop us. She would just smile and take it. That is what she always does." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even the stenographer paused for a split second. Judge Vance leaned forward over the bench. Her expression, previously neutral, had hardened into something sharp and dangerous. "Let me understand this correctly," the judge said, her voice cutting through the tension. "You are admitting that your plan relied entirely on exploiting the plaintiff's social anxiety? You calculated that she would be too humiliated to assert her property rights?" Tessa shrank back in her seat. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant—" Evan did not let her finish. He walked back to his table and picked up a tablet. "Your Honor, that admission aligns perfectly with the digital evidence we retrieved from the defendant's group chat." He connected the tablet to the courtroom display. A series of text messages appeared on the large screen. They were green bubbles, dated October 28th, 3 hours before the party. Sender: Diane. Message: "Remember, do not ask, just do. If we ask, she has a chance to think. Just bring the boxes in while the music is loud. She won't kick up a fuss with her boss standing right there." Sender: Brianna. Message: "Move the crib in first. No one kicks out a baby." Sender: Tessa. Message: "LOL. Ambush style. I love it. The evidence was up there in high definition. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a raid." Diane stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is private family communication," she shouted, her voice shrill. You have no right to show this. You are twisting our words. We were just trying to help her. She is lonely. Mrs. Hernandez, sit down. Judge Vance ordered. She is my daughter, Diane continued, pointing at me. I gave her life, and this is how she repays me? By hacking my phone? Mr. Cole obtained those messages through a lawful subpoena, Judge Vance said, her voice booming. This is a court of law, madam, not your living room. You do not control the volume here. Sit down, or I will hold you in contempt. Diane sank back into her chair, but her eyes were burning holes into the back of my head. For the first time, I saw her not as a powerful matriarch, but as a desperate woman losing her grip on the narrative. Evan was not done. He moved to the final, most damning piece of the puzzle, the forged deed. He signaled for the next slide. The screen changed to show two signatures side by side. On the left was my signature from the mortgage documents, a fluid, rapid scrawl. On the right was the signature from the quitclaim deed, shaky, hesitant, with heavy ink blots at the start of each letter. Evan turned to the forensic document examiner who had taken the stand earlier. A severe-looking woman named Dr. Aris. Dr. Aris, Evan said. Can you remind the court of your findings regarding the signature on the right? Doctor. Aris adjusted her glasses. It is a simulation, she stated flatly. The pen lifts are inconsistent with natural writing. You can see microscopic hesitations where the writer stopped to look at a reference model. It is a tracing, and a poor one. Evan nodded. And the notary stamp? Doctor. Aris flipped a page in her report. The stamp format violates the Virginia notary requirements for the year 2024. The font is wrong, the border is too thick, and as noted, the commission number belongs to a deceased individual. This was not notarized. It was stamped with a counterfeit tool. Evan turned his back to the expert and faced my family. He walked until he was standing directly in front of the defense table. He looked at Diane, then at Brianna, then at Jade, then at Tessa. Someone in this family sat down with a pen and traced Brooklyn's name. Evan said quietly, Someone in this family ordered a fake stamp. Someone in this family drove to the house in the middle of the night to plant the envelope. He paused. Who was it? The silence was excruciating. It stretched out for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Then, the unity finally broke. It was Jade. I told you it was a bad idea. Mom, Jade hissed. Her voice was a whisper, but in the silent courtroom, it sounded like a scream. Diane's head snapped toward her. Shut up. Jade, I am not going to jail for this, Jade said, her voice rising to a panic. You said it was just a formality. You said Brooklyn wouldn't notice until it was too late. I did not trace it, Diane shot back. Tessa did it. Tessa has the art degree. Tessa's jaw dropped. You told me to. You gave me the light box. You said if I didn't do it, we would lose the house. Brianna started crying. I didn't touch the paper. I just drove the car. I just drove Rick's car to pick it up. Judge Vance watched them with an expression of profound disgust. It was all unraveling. The grand family partnership had dissolved into a circular firing squad of blame. They were not fighting for their home anymore. They were fighting to stay out of handcuffs. Evan watched them for a moment, letting the jury, if there had been one, absorb the spectacle. Then he turned back to me. He gave me a small nod. He faced the judge. Your Honor, Evan said, his voice ringing with finality, you have heard the testimony, you have seen the messages, you have heard them turn on each other. He pointed at the defense table. They do not want a family. They do not want a relationship. They want an asset. They looked at my client, and they did not see a sister or a daughter. They saw a bank account they could drain and a property they could seize. And when manipulation failed, they resorted to fraud. Evan closed his file folder with a sharp snap. They are willing to send their own sister to the street, willing to forge legal documents, willing to lie under oath. We ask the court not just for a dismissal of their claims, but for full punitive damages. We ask the court to send a message that being family is not a license to steal. I looked at my mother. She was no longer looking at me. She was arguing with Tessa, her hands waving frantically. Brianna was sobbing into her hands. Jade was staring at the floor, shaking her head. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not joy. It was not triumph. It was the sudden, sharp clarity of grief finally ending. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my place at that table. I had spent thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, trying to be good enough for them. And now, watching them tear each other apart over a fake stamp and a stolen house, I realized the truth. There was no table. There never had been. There was only a feeding frenzy, and I was finally off the menu. Judge Vance did not shout. She did not bang her gavel for dramatic effect. She simply adjusted her glasses, looked down at the paperwork in front of her, and began to dismantle my family's delusions with the surgical precision of a coroner determining a cause of death. The court finds that the plaintiff, Brooklyn Hernandez, is the sole fee simple owner of the property at 42 Oak Ridge Drive. Judge Vance stated. Her voice was monotone. Stripping the moment of any emotional ambiguity, the defendants have failed to provide a single shred of credible evidence regarding a partnership, a trust, or a financial contribution. The claim of a verbal contract is dismissed with prejudice, as it is contradicted by the defendant's own recorded admissions. I felt a knot in my chest loosen, a knot that had been tied there since I was 6 years old and first learned that my wants were secondary to my sister's needs. Regarding the counterclaim for partition and access, the judge continued, looking directly at Diane, denied. The court finds that the actions taken on October 28th did not constitute a family visit. They constituted a coordinated, premeditated trespass. The labeling of rooms, the hiring of professional movers, and the termination of prior leases indicate an intent to occupy the property permanently without the owner's consent. She paused, letting the weight of that word, trespass, settle over the defense table. Therefore, the court is granting the plaintiff's request for a permanent protective order. Diane let out a gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. For a period of 5 years, Judge Vance read, Diane Hernandez, Brianna Hernandez, Tessa Hernandez, and Jade Hernandez are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the plaintiff's home, place of employment, or person. You are prohibited from contacting the plaintiff by phone, email, text message, social media, or through third parties. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. 5 years. It sounded like a lifetime. It sounded like heaven. Now, regarding damages, the judge said, turning to the final page, the court finds for the plaintiff on the counts of trespass, civil conspiracy, and slander of title. The defendants are jointly and severally liable for the following amounts. I held my breath. Legal fees incurred by the plaintiff, $42,000. Security system upgrades necessitated by the breach, $8,000. Lost wages and emotional distress, $35,000. Diane's eyes bulged. She did not have $85,000. None of them did. Total judgment entered in favor of the plaintiff is $85,000, Judge Vance concluded. This judgment will accrue interest at the statutory rate of 6% per annum until paid in full. The court authorizes the garnishment of wages and the placing of liens on any assets held by the defendants to satisfy this debt. But it was the final blow that shattered them completely. Finally, Judge Vance said, her eyes narrowing as she picked up the forensic report on the forged deed. Regarding the document recorded on October 29th, the court is referring this matter to the Brierstone County District Attorney's Fraud Division for criminal investigation. The evidence suggests a felony forgery and the uttering of a false public record. The color drained from Tessa's face so fast I thought she was going to faint. Jade put her head on the table. Brianna looked at Diane with a mixture of horror and hatred. This court is adjourned, Judge Vance said. She stood up and walked out. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a reality check that had bounced. Diane sat frozen in her chair. For the first time in her life, her manipulation had hit a wall it could not climb. She could not cry her way out of this. She could not guilt-trip a court order. She could not gaslight a garnishment. I stood up. Evan packed his briefcase. Good job. Brooklyn, he said quietly. I looked at them one last time. They were not looking at me. They were looking at the ruin of their own lives. A ruin they had built brick by brick with their own entitlement. I walked out of the courtroom. I did not say goodbye. The restraining order was already in effect. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in logistics. I did not want to see them. I did not want to hear their excuses. But their boxes, the mountains of stuff they had dragged into my house, were still sitting in my hallway. I hired a third-party removal service. I paid them to haul every single box, every bag of clothes, every piece of furniture out of my house and onto the driveway. Then I had Evan send a notification to Mr. Graves. The defendants have 4 hours to retrieve their personal property from the curb at 42 Oak Ridge Drive. They may not enter the house. They may not approach the front door. Security will be present. I watched from my bedroom window on the second floor. I stood behind the sheer curtains, invisible to the street below. At 2:00 in the afternoon, the caravan arrived. It was not the triumphant arrival of the moving truck from the night of the party. It was a funeral procession of mismatched vehicles. Brianna's husband drove a rental van. Tessa brought her beat-up sedan. Jade arrived in an Uber. They looked small from up here. There was no shouting. There was no posturing. There were 2 private security guards I had hired standing at the end of the driveway, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses. My family worked in silence. They lifted the boxes labeled master bedroom and shoved them into the back of the van. Tessa threw her bar supplies into her trunk with angry, jerky movements. Diane stood by the car, not lifting a finger, just staring at the house, staring at the window where she knew I was watching. But she could not see me. The glare of the sun on the glass turned the window into a mirror. All she could see was her own reflection, distorted and small. I zoomed in with the security camera on my phone. I wanted to see their faces. They were not united against me anymore. I saw Brianna snap at Tessa when she dropped a box. I saw Jade refusing to help Diane with a heavy bag. They were bickering. They were fracturing. The judgment of $85,000 was a poison pill. They were jointly and severally liable, which meant the debt collectors could go after whoever had the money. If Jade had savings, they would take it to pay Brianna's share. If Tessa got a paycheck, they would garnish it to pay Diane's share. I had tied them together, not with love, but with debt. And they would tear each other apart trying to escape it. By 4:00, the driveway was empty. The last van pulled away. I walked downstairs. The hallway was clear. The dining room was empty. The air in the house felt different. It was lighter. The oppressive weight of their entitlement was gone. I went to the front door and locked it. Then I opened my new security app. I changed the master code. I set up a geofence that would alert me if their phones came within a mile of my router. I activated the facial recognition on the doorbell. I was not locking myself in. I was locking the toxicity out. The fallout happened fast. Within a week, the Hernandez family reunion chat, which I still monitored via a burner account Evan had advised me to keep for evidence, imploded. The news of the forgery referral had leaked. The relatives who had called me selfish were now terrified of being associated with felons. Aunt Rosa posted a long message about honesty and integrity, distancing herself from Diane, cousin Mike, who had called me cold, sent me a private apology text, claiming he didn't know the whole story. I didn't reply, but the sweetest victory was the silence. My phone didn't ring with demands. My weekends weren't hijacked by guilt trips. I didn't have to dread the holidays. 1 month later, on a Tuesday evening, I sat in my living room. It was a cold night in Virginia. A frost had settled on the lawn, turning the grass silver under the moonlight. Inside, the gas fireplace was roaring, casting a warm golden glow over the white rugs, the rugs Brianna had wanted to cover with toddler gear. I was not alone. Sarah was there, sitting on the sofa with her feet tucked under her. Beside her was Evan, who had become a good friend once the billable hours stopped. We were sharing a bottle of vintage Cabernet that I had been saving for a special occasion. This was the occasion. There was no party. There were no 40 guests. There was no catering. Just 3 people. A fire, and the truth, to the homeowner. Evan said, raising his glass. To the winner, Sarah added, clinking her glass against mine. I looked at the red wine swirling in the crystal. To the survivor. I corrected them softly. I took a sip. It tasted like blackberries and oak. It tasted like victory. I looked around the room. The shadows were where I wanted them to be. The noise was only the noise I chose to make. The keys in my pocket were the only set in existence. I thought about Diane, probably sitting in a cramped apartment, arguing with Tessa about who was going to pay the lawyer for the criminal defense. I thought about Brianna, realizing that having a baby didn't make her exempt from the law. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was brief, like a match struck in the wind. They had chosen their path. They had chosen to view me as a resource rather than a person. They had gambled their relationship with me for square footage, and they had lost both. I leaned back into the plush cushions of my armchair. I realized then that revenge wasn't about making them suffer. Their suffering was just a byproduct of their own choices. Revenge was this. It was sitting in my own house, drinking my own wine, surrounded by people who respected me, and feeling absolutely, completely calm. Peace didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be explained. And most importantly, it didn't need permission from anyone named Hernandez. I closed my eyes and listened to the crackle of the fire. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country, and let's share our thoughts on Brooklyn's victory. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the channel Leona Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to see justice served.